Greetings, Dungeon Delvers and fellow DMs, and welcome back to the DM's Den. Continuing forward on our analysis of all of the common and uncommon races. By analysis, I mean in-depth look of all of their features and traits. We are going to talk about Elves today. Elves are slender and graceful, tend to be either the same height as humans or maybe even a little bit taller, and very dexterous beings. Their societies, however, can appear aloof and separated from especially humans and other societies. It just means that their approach to life tends to be more logic-based. If you want a fictional equivalent, think of a Vulcan. They're also a bit more in control of their emotions. To see an angry elf is a big deal and probably means that the insult that was suffered or the state of affairs is in dire straits because the elf is mad. Elves are also very long-lived creatures. They mature at about the same rate as humans, but they're not considered to be adults or to take on an adult name until about the age of 100. And they tend to live to about 700 years, some even living to 1,000 years. These are some very ancient beings. This gives them a certain educated perspective. An elf can take on training in many different jobs because their lives are so long. It should create opportunities to have a working knowledge of very old things. Things that would be probably too old for the lifetime or for several generations of humans. Or you may have an elf who has been a friend to not just a human, but that human's family. And that human's family back several generations. Because that one elf would be alive for those several generations. And that's kind of interesting to have that perspective. They are very graceful beings. They tend to be more in tune to the magics of the world because they've seen some stuff happen. And when it comes to his history and being a historian and understanding how history functions, that may also feed into the idea of why an elf may be a little more removed from present circumstance because they understand history, and maybe they've been alive a long enough time that they've seen this. They don't have to be as emotional in the moment because their lives are much longer. So they gained that perspective, that longevity perspective. It's an interesting state to take. Now into everybody's favorite part. All those cool traits. If you choose Elf, you increase your dexterity score by 2. Slender and graceful people. They tend to be very good with intricate movement, detailed movement. They make excellent rogues, casters, rangers. But I've seen very successful monks. I've seen an amazing elven barbarian at one point. It was awesome. Oh, he was a drow. He's a drow barbarian, which is a sub-race. We'll get to those. Because of the artful, educated style of an elf, they actually tend toward the gentler sides of chaos. So you'll find a chaotic neutral elf character because of that freedom of expression, of creativity, and that level of intelligence. So they don't necessarily have to follow a code of ethics, like the dwarves are kind of set in their code of ethics. An elf, because of their education and because of the different branches of education and that freedom of expression, it's a gentle chaos. So there's chaotic good and chaotic neutral. It's rare that you'll find a chaotic evil, but we'll get to that in a moment when we start talking about the sub-races. When it comes to size, elves are considered medium creatures, thus their speed is 30 feet, so 6 squares. They also possess dark vision, being another non-human race, so they have dark vision 60. They also possess keen senses, which is, regardless of what your class gives you, they start with proficiency in the perception skill. Automatically, proficiency in the perception skill. They also have this cool thing called Fey Ancestry, where they have advantage on saving throws against being charmed and certain magical effects like that, and they cannot be magically put to sleep, which really ticks my wizard off. Another feature that elves possess is called Trance. Elves do not need to sleep. Instead, they meditate deeply, and you gain the benefits of a long rest in half the time. So if your long rest normally for everyone else takes 8 hours, yours takes 4 hours, which is pretty awesome. Languages are pretty straightforward. You know Common and Elvish. Elvish is a very fluid language with subtle intonations and very intricate grammar. It's very common in amazing songs and poems and interesting fiction. A lot of bards will just learn Elvish because that way they can add Elvish ballads to their rep. That's a really cool thing. Their language is just, it's beautiful. It's soft and gentle and flows very well in a way that's almost whimsical or magical, which is neat. Elves have 3 subraces: the High Elf, the Wood Elf, and the Drow. High Elves are considered more learned. You live in a high society, often maybe in a house with a house name, house family. Your setting is a lot more court-based, and you are into your studies. That's what you do. You live in an elven city, or you came from an elven city, you came from a high society family, and you're all about learning. You've learned a lot. Your additional ability score increase will give you a +1 to your intelligence. You also, you can read, write, and speak one more language of your choice. Because of your learning, you can cast 1 cantrip from the wizard spell list. Intelligence is your spell casting ability for this. Again, all these things are separate from your class. You also have additional elven weapon training. The elven weapon training is in the 2 swords, so short sword and long sword, and the 2 bows, short bow and long bow, separate from your class. You start with that training. Whereas the High Elf has very long, elegant features, the Wood Elf has sort of, well, wooden, coppery, browns, earth tones, wood-like features. Sometimes their faces are literally copper toned with traces of green. You can tell these types of elves come from the woods. They live and breathe the woods. For this, their wisdom increases by 1. They also possess some really cool features. They have the elven weapon training from the High Elves, so again, short sword, short bow, long bow. But they also have these cool things called Fleet of Foot. Instead of your base speed being 30, theirs is 35. You may think that's not that big of a deal. Become a Wood Elf monk. You can run around the board in no time. It's awesome. And that extra step means a whole heck of a lot when you have enemies that can move quite a bit, or flying enemies that have immense fly speeds. That extra square makes a huge difference. They also have this ability called Mask of the Wild. Mask of the Wild lets you hide a lot easier, just hide during natural phenomena. A rainstorm, a snowstorm, a foggy area, anything that is this natural change in visibility, you can hide, which is very cool. Finally, you have the Dark Elf, or the Drow. So remember what I was saying about alignment? Yes, most elves tend to be chaotic good, chaotic neutral, maybe just pure neutral, neutral. A Drow, they became Drow because they were High Elves exiled to the Underdark. And because of that exile, because of that pain, many Drow end up being evil. Not saying that when you pick the Drow subrace you have to become evil, but your culture tends toward more aggression, more violence, more subterfuge, a lot more darker themes because they were exiled from the elven society. You are the dark elf. And if you're a dark elf, you might be fighting against that stigma from other elves. Dark elves tend to have red eyes, maybe gray, white hair, pale skin, or this dark, dark black, dark blue, dark navy skin that makes them look kind of outlandish and threatening. Now, you don't have to be outlandish and threatening, but that's what you kind of look like. So you have those features that feed into this stigma. But you have other cool stuff that you get too. Because of all those features, your charisma score increases by 1 if you are a drow. Because you've been underground for so long, remember the drow live in the Underdark, they come from the Underdark. You have superior dark vision. You are the only race in the core rulebook to have superior dark vision, which means you have dark vision up to 120 feet. That comes from being underground for so long. Unfortunately, because you've been underground for so long, you're sensitive to sunlight, which means anything in direct sunlight while you're trying to make a perception check, you have disadvantage on. This is the first time that we have something negative from a race. However, you get different weapon proficiencies. You are proficient in the rapier, the longsword, and the hand crossbow, as opposed to the proficiencies of the wood elf and the high elf, because you are different. And you have specifically drow magic. With drow magic at first level, you can cast dancing lights. Third level, you can cast fairy fire. And fifth level, you can cast darkness. Again, these are separate from your class. These can be huge, huge helpful spells in many situations. Especially if you pick a class that is not a caster. You can cast spells because you're a drow. That's pretty cool. So, as a quick overview, elves, graceful beings. High elf gives you a lot of education. Intelligence goes up. Wood elf gives you a lot of nature abilities, ability to hide in natural phenomena, a little bit faster walking speed. Your wisdom goes up. Drow, you're scary. Charisma goes up. You get superior dark vision. You don't like the sun. You get magic, and you get different weapon proficiencies. I hope that helped you out with elf. Up next is halfling. May your swords be sharp, your magic be potent, and if you're a drow, put on some sunscreen, man. I'll see you later. Hey there, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of the Dungeon Master's Den. Well, if you want to see other videos, you can click on my face that's burning over a bunch of fire right now. If you are from the Book of Faces and you want to check out more of my work and not just the DM's Den, other work that I do as well, you can check out my Facebook page, which is linked right here. And if you happen to be an owner of a bag of holding that is just overflowing with gold, let me help you out and free up some space. You can fit that brand new shiny plate mail in there too. And you can go head over to my Patreon and help out. Maybe. If you feel like it. Okay, bye.